Hi, I'm Brad, and welcome to DTF Garage. Hi, I'm Brad. Welcome back to DTF Garage and our first installment of my project XR2 SuperCoupe. This is a 2000 Ford Focus ZX3 that I purchased a few years back, and I'm doing a rear-wheel drive swap with it. Rear-wheel drive swap and a Focus has been around pretty much as long as the Focus has been around. Ford actually used to offer rear-wheel drive swap components so you could shove the 5.0 in one of these babies. I'm taking a little bit different approach though. I'm using the stock 2-liter Zetec plant that came in the engine, fully built engine, forged internals, and 10.2 to 1 compression, and a Roots M90 supercharger from a Thunderbird SuperCoupe. Now, a lot of people, when they do these rear-wheel drive swaps as well, they also stick in a solid live rear axle, usually from a Fox body. I really like the independent rear suspension and the way the Focus handles with it, so I'm actually doing that swap with the intention of keeping the rear independent suspension. For that, I am using a rear end out of a Volvo S40. Since both the Focus and the S40 are on the same platform, it'll actually bolt right up to the car. I do have to use a different differential for that though. I'm using an Explorer differential that is built to work with IRS axles. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of work on the 2-liter Zetec engine that I have planned for this vehicle. This engine is actually out of my old Focus. It was a 2002 ZX5 that I had supercharged. Now that vehicle was still front-wheel drive, and I had the supercharger mounted on top of the engine, and it was pretty badass. Unfortunately, I flipped the car due to a very unfortunate rollover before I could get it tuned. This is the engine out of that vehicle. So her heart lives on with me and with my new ZX3 here. This engine I have fully built by myself. I did take it to Gunn Automotive up in Denver for the machining. They honed out the cylinders a little bit so I could put some new pistons in, and they did a fantastic job of that. Aside from that though, I have done everything else myself. I completely tore down the engine, put everything in, pistons, rods, everything like that, and built the whole thing from ground up. So it's a very stout little engine. I've got SuperTech pistons with a 10.2 to compression ratio and equal forged connecting rods with it. I am actually using these stock cams with this engine. Now you can get boost cams for it, but the boost cams are very similar to the stock camshafts in these. So for what I'm going for, and I'm not going for a crazy build, so I could get boost cams, but they're going to be a little bit better than the stock ones, but the stock ones are actually proven to be really good for boost. If I were going NA and the high horsepower, I would have swapped cams, but since we're supercharged, it's fine. This is going to be a little bit different, and part of the reason that I went rear-wheel drive is so I could mount the supercharger on the side of the engine, be a little more discreet, so you're not going to have a big old blower sticking out of the hood like I was with my old car. It's going to just kind of look like a nice lowered Focus with a big old supercharger underneath it. So attached to the back of this, I do have an RX-8 transmission. This is actually a 5-speed imported from Japan because we only got these 6-speed transmissions here in the States. But I really wanted the 5-speed for the gearing, and they're a little bit stronger than the 6 speeds as well. Now this was the idler pulley that I just took off this engine. This is actually made for a Duratec engine, and I modified the pulley to stick out a couple extra centimeters to line up with the Zetec pulleys. I'm using this in place because I'm not using a belt-driven power steering pump on this vehicle. I'm going to be using an electric power steering pump, so I have a pulley to go in that place. Now I modified this to kind of work with the setup, but all in all I wasn't comfortable actually running on the car with the couple spacers that I put in here, so I decided to get one actually designed to work with this engine. This one I had to import from overseas, since they like the Zetec engine a lot more than we do in the States. So this one's going to line up and is going to work a little bit better, and I'm not going to have to worry about that possibly failing or that pulley possibly coming off while the engine's running, especially with the all the added torque from that supercharger on there. This is an alternator bracket, relocates the alternator to this side of the vehicle that I, again, imported from Europe from DA Engineering. Really solid stuff and beautiful work. This is actually the exact spacing that I need because these sit just behind here. So this is going to go on to hold the alternator on, and then the engine mount bracket is going to sit right on top of that. Not the way I would have designed it if I were an engineer, but I'm not one, hence why I'm doing this. Right now I'm trying to get a stock Focus alternator to work with this DA Engineering bracket. DA Engineering makes these four-wheel drive swaps, but these are mostly for European vehicles. These swaps are going into Escorts and stuff like that, so they have older type V-belt alternators. They don't have the pulley alternators. Plus I want to use the stock alternator on this, as it has the factory connections and regulator and everything that this car already needs. So I'm trying to get to use this with it. It is a little off from what I thought it might be, and I figured I might run into some issues here. So the alternator is supposed to sit on either side of this bracket here. I figured out with it actually came with a couple spacers here to kind of make everything work. If I offset it just a little bit and put this in front of here and then put a little spacer back here, it lines up with the pulleys perfectly. So it looks like I'm gonna have to do a little bit of modification here to this bracket. I might have to cut into the alternator a little bit, which I don't really want to do, but it looks like it should just be a tad, so it's not gonna be too bad. So I can get to these rear bolts to line up here. So hopefully I can get this working so I can reuse the alternator that's meant for this PCM and harness. I want to do as little grinding and cutting as possible, since most cutting is irreversible. So I've narrowed these down, these couple nubs down on this alternator here. I think that might be enough to get us started, where I can get these bolts to line up here. If I need more, then I will take a little bit out of the bracket here, but I think from what I've got here, it might be close enough to get us up to the bracket. So let's go ahead and check this out. All right, I've got all the grinding and cutting done that I needed to do on this piece here. I didn't have to do any trimming on this bracket, which is nice. Just a little trimming back here. And I got the other spacer that came with this kit. It came with these two spacers. These are actually exactly what I needed to get this to work. So now all I gotta do is bolt it all up, double check that the pulley lines up with all the other pulleys on the engine, which should be fine, and we're all set and the alternator bracket works. If I actually wanted to make 500 for it, I'd probably try to build it to withstand about 100 horsepower before. If I was going to aim for 500 horsepower, I'd build it for what?